And a pleasant good morning. It's morning. It's 10 a.m. Eastern time. Good morning to everyone out there in Irish Breakdown land, and welcome to IB Countdown to Kickoff. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been 8 long months. We have been waiting for this morning for I don't know how long. I woke up this morning, it felt like Christmas morning. I'm not going to lie to you. I was super excited about it. I'm going to be fired up all day. I don't know how I'm going to deal with a 4+ hour car ride on the way to Columbus, but I'm super fired up.
We're going to do a lot of talking.
We are going to do a lot of talking. There's no doubt about that. But it's going to be a blast. This is going to be a great day. We get to finally talk about a game day situation. Brian, I'm fired up. So let's just set the scene here for this show, because this is our first game day show. We had one last week, but it was kind of a preseason edition. So this is our first game day show. Normally, I'm on that side of the screen, and then in my spot is our buddy Sean Styers. It'll be the two of us getting you ready for kickoff every single week. But Sean had a little bit of a medical scare over the past couple of days, and so he's still in the hospital. We kind of shared this with you guys yesterday, I believe, and I'll let you, Brian, you kind of fill in kind of what's going on with Sean, and hopefully we're going to get him back real soon.
Well, Sean had a hard episode, and he appreciates, he also tweeted out and appreciates that everybody was thinking about him and praying for him, Vince, but he had a hard episode and had some dizziness and some shortness of breath. And so his wife, who's a nurse, I think she was the one that advised him, you need to go to the hospital.
Yeah, right. When the nurse tells you,
right.
Okay.
And they found out that there was a major blockage in his heart. So
crazy.
Fortunately, he did not get to the point where he had a heart attack because they found it soon enough. So thank God that he had the episode that he had yesterday, because that led him to go into the hospital to find out what was going on. He had a pacemaker put in. So that should help alleviate the issue. And he is going to kind of be down for a few days. He's still in the hospital now, but he does expect to be able to go home tomorrow at the latest. Awesome. So definitely good news in that regard, but continued prayers for his recovery, and wisdom by the doctors is certainly appreciated. But we'll get him back here soon enough. And in the meantime, we're going to have to That's right. We're gonna have to pick up the slack, right? Next man in, and get her done, and try to do Sean proud, because I know he was excited to do this first countdown to kickoff show. So
yeah, absolutely, because this is his baby, and he and I have been really looking forward to this show for a really long time.
We've been wanting to do this for a couple years, Vince.
Correct,
and it just was like it's got to be the right team. Yeah. And once Sean came on board, it was like, that's the team, Vince and Sean. So we'll get them back here as soon as possible, and it's going to be rock and roll. But I'll do my best to fill in for you and Sean, today, Vince, as we get ready for this huge
oh my gosh huge matchup. So let's set the stage, right? We've got Ohio State, we've got Notre Dame. Notre Dame took off yesterday, headed to Columbus, so they're in town. They had their walkthrough yesterday at the Horseshoe, so they're ready to rock and roll. The game 7:30 tonight on Fox. Is that accurate? I didn't write that down. I should have written that down.
I think it's on ABC.
Is it on ABC? Okay, thank you very much. So it's on ABC. So make sure you tune into that.
I know that because Sean wrote a how to watch then listen to the game article on the front page of irishbreakdown.com.
See,
that has the Sirius channel, the streaming channel. There's a live, there's a free trial offer from Fubo TV. It'll be on there.
Nice.
But it's 7:30 p.m. Eastern on ABC.
Okay, and there was a question in the chat, and it was a long time ago, so I'm not even going to look for it, but there was a question in the chat about, will there be a live chat over on the board during the game? Of course there will be.
Yes.
And if Sean's home, I can almost guarantee you he'll be contributing to it, but I don't want to make any promises there.
Yeah.
But Brian will be contributing to it. I'll be contributing to it, so that'll be kind of a fun, game day thread. It always is a good time.
Yes.
Alan Watson with the super chat. Thank you, Alan. Game day is here. smoker cooking, beer chilling, ready for an Irish win. He's predicting 38-30 Irish score late to seal the win.
I can't wait for this game. Let's get rocking and rolling, man,
Yes.
Vince, because this is just I'm getting too fired up. So we're going to talk Notre Dame first, right? And then we are going to preview some of the other games that are going to be played, some of the other big games of the weekend. We're going to talk, I believe, Georgia and Florida. We're going to talk, Georgia and Oregon. We're going to talk Florida and Utah. We're going to talk Cincinnati, Arkansas, and I believe we're going to talk about the Monday game, the Sunday or Monday game, right? A little bit as well. So, we'll get that one rocking and rolling as well. So, going to also cover some big college football. One of the best week ones in a long time. And of course, it's just nice that Notre Dame is playing in the marquee game. Sorry, had to do that.
Had to go there, didn't you? Had to go there.
Of the opening weekend of college football, the real opening weekend of the 2022 season.
So yes, absolutely. So we are gonna, you will see a trend going when we talk about, or when we start doing these shows and kind of how we break things down. So the first hour plus, we're gonna talk Notre Dame, and we're gonna talk about the matchup, and we're gonna talk to somebody who covers the opponent, things of that nature. So that's gonna be the first hour plus, and then we'll round out the last, 40 to 45 minutes talking about college football as a whole. And yes, we are going to talk about the college football playoff and all of that. And we're going to talk about the big games, as Brian alluded to. So that's kind of how we're going to go through things. And so it's Notre Dame followed by college football as a whole. And we're going to round out your 2 hours and just have a friggin' blast. I'm excited. I'm pretty fired up about this whole thing. So let's talk Ohio State, Brian. We're always going to talk about what's at stake for Notre Dame, but this show is a little bit different. It's the first show of the season. It's the first game of the season. We're talking about what's at stake. This is almost a what's at stake nationally for this game. Sure. It's such a big game. I mean, yes, what's at stake for Notre Dame, what's at stake for Ohio State. But this is the marquee game of the weekend. I mean, sure. I don't even think that's arguable, if I'm being honest with you. So let's talk about that. So what's at stake in this game for the winner, for the loser? Where do they go after this? How does that affect, college football as a whole?
Well, for number one, if we just look at just this season, right? So let's focus on the 2022 season and not so much what it means for Notre Dame, big picture, what it means for recruiting momentum. Let's just talk about how it impacts the 2022 season for these two football teams. Number one, this is the number 2 Ohio State and number 5 Notre Dame teams in the country, which means one team that people think is in some capacity a contender for the college football playoff is going to get a loss in the opening game. There's no more ties anymore, right? Like this isn't 1988 or 90-91. There are no more ties. Somebody's going to win, somebody's going to lose. And so some team that is a playoff contender is going to catch a loss in the opener.
Right,
which
game one.
does not eliminate that team from the playoff. Even a blowout doesn't necessarily eliminate them from the college football playoff. We saw Georgia back in 2017 get blown out by Auburn and still make the college football playoff. I think for Notre Dame, a blowout would be more damaging than a blowout would be for Ohio State, simply because Ohio State would have a little extra stuff to kind of overcome that, like a Big Ten championship potentially if they went out. What it does is it puts these two teams all in a situation, Vince, where you're now for the remainder of the season. So for the next 12 weeks, you're in win or go home
absolutely
mode when it comes to the college football playoff. And that is a very interesting place to be after week one. And that's what it does. I mean, and that's what this weekend's going to do, right? Like same thing with Georgia, Oregon, right? Like those are, if you're like Vince, I think you said it earlier this week on a show, if you're in the top 15, you kind of enter the season with a shot at. Now, look, we've seen unranked teams. Notre Dame in 2012 started unranked and went all the way, but it puts you in a really good position where you can run the table. It also puts you in a good position where you can sustain a loss.
Right.
But the further down you are, the tougher it's going to be. And there's 2 Pac-12 teams we're going to discuss that are going on the road this weekend too, who could see their playoff chances just go up and smoke in week one. So I think that's the thing that makes this week one entertaining. And when you look at this particular matchup, somebody's going to be in a situation where you cannot afford to lose again for the rest of the season.
Right.
And that's going to be huge. I mean, there's recruiting impact and there's direction of your program impact, but looking at it from a standpoint of the 2022 season, this is going to have huge implications. And then last thing, Vince, if one of these if the winner were to drop a game to somebody they shouldn't lose a game to, this win gives them a huge resume boost where they can sustain that kind of loss if they were to stub their toe, because going undefeated in college football is hard. Nick Saban's won 7 national championships. Only 2 of those teams were undefeated.
Right.
And one of them was in a COVID year where they didn't play anybody out of conference until, they got to the postseason. So it is hard to go undefeated. So having this kind of get out of jail free card with a win in the opening weekend like this is going to be huge for both programs, especially Notre Dame.
No question. And this is, look, Notre Dame has that stigma, right, of the big game failures. You talk about the major bowls and you talk about all these different things. Now, of course, they never talk about the close losses to Georgia because that doesn't fit the narrative. And I get it to a degree.
Because it is the anomaly. It's not a normal situation.
And they dismissed the Clemson win because Clemson was missing not only Trevor Lawrence, but 2 pretty key cogs on the defense.
Mike Jones, right.
Yeah, so I get all of that. I totally get all of that. So Notre Dame has an opportunity here very, very early in the Marcus Freeman era to kind of rewrite that, that narrative for Notre Dame, or they slip right back into it. And I don't feel like there's a whole lot of middle ground. And I hate to say it that way, but I just don't feel that way. Yes, a close loss, you can kind of explain it away if it's competitive late in the fourth quarter.
I actually think a close loss would do that because of the perception of they're going to get blown out. I think if it was a 3-point spread and they lost by 4, it'd be like, yeah, I mean, you are who we thought you were.
Sure.
Because the Georgia game in 2019 is really a great example, Vince, because remember the spread was for that game was 16 points.
Right.
I mean, people just thought Notre Dame was going to go down to Athens and get run off the field, and they played them down to the wire. They had the ball.
They had the opportunity to win.
At their own 48, if we're going to get technical, I think it was at their own 48 with a minute 51 left, and, I mean, a golden opportunity to go down and win the game, and led for most of the game, and that earned a lot of people's respect. So since that people think, I mean, it's a 2 touchdown and a field goal is not enough to get to the cover, right? The spread, you know what I mean? The spread, like that's still not where you are to get to the 17.5.
Right.
So there's a perception going to get blown out. So I do think a competitive loss, if it's a real competitive loss, not like one where you score a couple times late and make it more, competitive. Where
it's
you're
an actual
clearly
game in the fourth quarter.
Legitimate, yes, exactly.
One possession game in the fourth quarter for me.
I do think that helps Notre Dame. But it's not.
It doesn't erase it, though.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't erase it. And I guess that's the point I was making. It doesn't erase the narrative. It's like, okay, well, maybe this is a one-off, that sort of a thing. And you're still going to get – look, Notre Dame's always going to get the hate from people. That until they win a national title, they're going to get the hate. And
even then, well, they didn't have to play in a conference championship.
Right. Yeah. Oh, my gosh. Of it. Yes, you are absolutely right. So this is a huge game. It's a huge game for both parties. There's no doubt about that, which makes it even more exciting. So let's jump into specifically. Let's pretend that you live on a foreign planet and you've never heard of Ohio State. Let's talk a little bit about Ohio State, what they bring to the table, what Notre Dame is going to face coming in. Obviously, Ryan Day is the head coach of Ohio State. They have a brand new defensive coordinator. And I think that is somewhat the storyline here. If you're a Notre Dame fan and you're looking for a narrative for Notre Dame to win, a path to victory for Notre Dame, this Ohio State defense hasn't been good, period.
Right. And so since 19 when Jeff Hafley was there.
Right. And so what does the addition of Coach Knowles from Oklahoma State, who Notre Dame is very familiar with the scheme based on the Fiesta Bowl, et cetera, he wasn't there, but still same scheme.
They broke down his defense to get ready for that game.
Correct. So I think that is the storyline here. What is this Ohio State defense? Because all we've heard all preseason, everybody that's been to Ohio State's practices, this front seven for Ohio State's the real deal, and this is going to be a different defense and all of these different things. Maybe that's true. Maybe it's not. So what is the Jim Knowles effect going into game one of his tenure at Ohio State? I think that's the narrative for me.
Well, I think that's to me, him and Ryan Day go hand in hand. And here's why I say that. because this is what separates Ryan Day from Lincoln Riley. And what I mean by that is Lincoln Riley is always looking for a defense that complements his offense, meaning just make enough stops for us to outscore teams, right? That's why Lincoln Riley's never won a meaningful game, in my opinion, right? Now, you can go back to the Ohio State game in 2017. Okay, fine. The second game of his career, when he inherited Bob Stoops' team and the attitude that Bob Stoops had installed, sure, they won at Ohio State. An Ohio State team that later in the year lost by over 30 to Iowa. Okay, so that was, in my opinion, the worst or second worst Ohio State team of the last decade. Okay. So you look at that. That's why they get blown out in the postseason, because you can't make stops. Where Ryan Day understands, no, the kind of team we need to win a championship is the kind of team we had in 2019, where, yes, we scored 46 points a game. We only gave up 13 points a game. And if it wasn't for a Herculean effort from one of the greatest quarterbacks of my generation, and Trevor Lawrence, they're playing LSU for a national title. Now, if there was a team built to beat LSU that year, it would have been that Ohio State team. When you think about the team that they had, I mean, you had Chase Young on the edge. You had Jeff Okudah at corner. I mean, that Ohio State secondary that year was about the only one that would have had any chance at all to slow down that LSU team in the postseason. So I think when you look at it, he understands if we want to win championships, it's got to be that kind of team. It can't be this team that's losing 35-28 to Oregon. It can't be a team losing 42-27 to Michigan. It can't be a team winning 48-45 shootouts. Ryan Day understands that to be a great championship program, you've got to be able to score, but you also got to be able to stop people and not get a stop or two, but be really good on defense. And I think that right there is why, if you were to say, hey, Brian, you got to make a prediction. Who wins a championship first, Ryan Day or Lincoln Riley? I'm like, it's Ryan Day before you even finish the question, because of that right there. 100%. And he hired Jim Knowles to do that. Now, will Jim Knowles be able to get that done? We'll find out. Build a good defense at Duke. Build a pretty darn good defense at Oklahoma State. Took him a while to get there because he inherited much worse situations than the one he's walking into at Ohio State.
Absolutely.
I think the question for me, Vince, is how quickly will Jim Knowles get this thing turned around? That, to me, is the bigger question. I think he's going to get this defense rolling in a good direction. I don't think they have the talent they've had in past years, but that's a pretty high bar. They still have talent. You know, is Cam Brown and Denzel Burke the same as Jaron Conley and Eli Apple in 2015? No, but they're still pretty good.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. And that's the thing is there a Chase Young on this defensive line, or a Nick Bosa or Joey Bosa? No, but there's still talent. Right. And so it's how quickly can you get everybody on the same page, improve their technique, improve their assignment correctness. That was the big thing last year. Their scheme was so unsound. And they would just like have these gaping holes, and you're like, what? How did that happen to Ohio State? You know, they just wouldn't cover guys. Their schemes were easy to kind of recognize and pick apart. Jim Knowles is the polar opposite of that. He's going to disguise. He's going to mask. He's going to bring pressures from all over. If you didn't watch the breakdown Ryan and I did on Tuesday, we kind of showed some screenshots to give you an example of just the different places. And we talked about, Vince, you're going to see 8 guys potentially able to come on every play. Now, they're not going to bring 8, but what I mean is the way they line up, you could see a corner fire, the linebackers, the safeties, the overhang, whether it's usually it's a nickel. So you're going to see all those guys potentially come, and the goal is to create mistakes from your line that then result in tackles for loss and or sacks. Oklahoma State was top 5 last year in both of those categories. And then obviously to create confusion by the quarterback that's going to lead to incompletions, lead to turnovers and things along those lines. So it is a far more complex defense for the offense to face. But what Jim Knowles has been good at is getting his players to understand that complexity and then execute it at a much higher level than a Brian Van Gorder, a John Tenuta, a Kerry Coombs, guys that have a similar Alex Grinch, similarly complex systems. But can you get them to execute it? That's the difference between the Brent Venables and the Jim Knowleses, and hopefully the Al Goldens from the other coaches who want to be complex, but don't know how to get their players to execute that complexity at a high level. And I think that's what made this a good hire. Now, is that going to be enough in week 1?
Right.
We'll find out.
That's the question. Agreed. That is the question. If you ask me, where do I want to face Ohio State if I'm, a fan of a team or covering a team, it's game 1, not game 10. I don't want to give him 10 games to get this defense right, to get them where he wants them to be. I don't want that. I want game 1, where there could be some missteps here and there that you have to take advantage of. Look, I'm not saying that he's going to throw out a bunch of scrubs and they're going to look like a terrible defense. That would be great, but that is not reality.
That'd be great for Notre Dame, sure.
Yes, that'd be great, but that's not reality. The reality is you have to take advantage of the small mistakes that they make, because there will be small mistakes. There will be a couple miscues, a coverage mess up, whatever. But if Notre Dame doesn't take advantage of those, it doesn't matter. And you got to pick your spots. So that's my big thing with watching this defense is, look, they're going to be better than they were last year. I fully anticipate that. But they're not going to be perfect. It's game one. I would be shocked if they play a perfect game defensively. Absolutely shocked by that. So let's talk a little analysis. You kind of alluded to the fact that you and Ryan, put together some screenshots and you kind of showed what the defense is all about. I kind of want to move over to the other side of the ball. I want to talk about the Ohio State offense, because they're the ones that are getting the press. I've heard them compared to the LSU offense of 2019. I have heard that. It's not me just making that up. What can this offense be, number one, just from an Ohio, not a versus Notre Dame yet at this point, but what can this offense be from Ohio State, from the film that you've watched? You're an offensive guy. I know you love offense. So what can this offense be for Ohio State? Then we'll talk about how Notre Dame can possibly slow them down a little bit.
We've heard a lot about Jim Knowles and how important he is and all that kind of stuff. I still believe that Justin Fry is every bit as important as Jim Knowles as a hire. Because what we've seen from Ohio State the last couple seasons, more so this past 2021 season than in 2020, which the COVID year was kind of weird, a weird, strange season. But Vince, they were far too one-dimensional this past season, and that's just not where they want to be. Right. And I think that when Ohio State's really rolling, they can really run the football. I mean, again, I'm going to keep pointing back to the 2019 team, because I think that was the best team they've had. I know some Ohio State people that disagree with me. One we'll have on today. But you look at that 2019 team, they ran for at least 200 yards in every single game in the regular season that year. And then they ran for 172 against Wisconsin in the Big Ten title game. Wisconsin had a really good run defense that year. But then they go to the college football playoff. But even in that game to Clemson, they still ran for 196 yards. And J.K. Dobbins, I believe, had a touchdown reception in that game. Last year, it looked early on like they were going to be good running the ball. Ran for over 200 against Minnesota, had 300 against Tulsa, 237 against Akron, 208 against Rutgers. But then there's that game in the middle of that against Oregon where they went for $128. And then over the next 4 games, they didn't get to 200 yards once. And they only had over 170 once against Indiana. They were 4-7 a carry against Penn State. Then they were held to 90 yards on 30 carries against Nebraska. Ran all over Purdue and Michigan State, and they got completely dominated by Michigan, and didn't really run the ball all that well against Utah either, but they didn't really try. And so to me, they had a severe lack of balance last year, and that's why Justin Fry got hired. Justin Fry got hired to bring back toughness, to bring back physicality, to get the run game back, because the other part of this is, again, he's trying to build a champion. He's not just 11-2. And I respect the heck out of Ryan Day for that, because we saw a similar situation like that with Notre Dame in 2015. Where, hey, if we, we're a touchdown here, we're a touchdown there, from being, a really good team. And, we just got to coach. Remember that? It was just, got to play a little harder and coach a little better, and made no staff changes. Ryan Day said, no, 11-2 is not good enough. Getting beat by Michigan's not acceptable. Getting beat at home by Oregon's not acceptable. Barely beating Utah in the Rose Bowl, where we gave up 45 points, is not acceptable. Getting held to under 100 yards, under 130 yards 3 times last year is not acceptable. And so what did he do? He went out and made changes and brought in Justin Fry, who is a really good, tough offensive line coach, worked with someone who Ryan Day knows well, and Chip Kelly, who Ryan Day worked for in the National Football League with the Niners and Eagles. And his goal is to get the run game back going. I think that's going to be the key for Ohio State, is to get back to being more balanced. They've got an elite running back in Travion Henderson, elite running back. And it's even more important that the run game, that the offensive line play well, because you don't have a dual threat quarterback like you did with Justin Fields or JT Barrett. Right. Now, he's not as immobile in the pocket as Dwayne Haskins was in 2018. He can, CJ Stroud's a good athlete. He can move the chains. He can, if you drop 8 and there's a crease, he can run for, 15 yards. But he had, I think as a freshman, had like a 50-yard touchdown. But it was like, he's not really a weapon as a runner, right? So you're not going to run a bunch of read zones. You're not going to run Q power, that kind of stuff, read and that kind of stuff. So you really need your offensive line to be able to get movement, open up holes, and get room for Travion Henderson, who has good size as a back, but is explosive. I mean, incredibly explosive back.
I almost feel like even though he's as good as you say, and I agree with you 1,000%, I almost feel like he's the X factor. He's the one that doesn't get talked about. It's all quarterback and wide receivers, quarterback and wide receivers. Travion Henderson's an afterthought, and he's really good. Right. He's really, really good. This offensive line for Ohio State is, I think, a little bit of an X factor as well. I mean, I know they've got some pretty highly touted tackles. They've got a brand new interior. Let's talk about versus Notre Dame now, because if we do the matchup game and we talk about advantages and all of those different things, I feel very confident in Notre Dame's front versus Ohio State's offensive line. Am I crazy? How do you see that matchup going? And is that a key to Notre Dame's defense and being successful, or at least partially successful, against this Ohio State offense?
Absolutely. I mean, look, this cannot be a situation where Ohio State's able to be balanced. If Ohio State is balanced in this game and they can run and throw, you have no chance. You better hope your offense is ready to score 50. Right. You have no chance. Because what we saw last year was a very prolific pass offense. But I think some of the stuff we hear about, comparisons to LSU in 2019, a lot of that's hyperbolic in my opinion. And they look at it based on, 45.6 points per game and all that, 45.7 points per game. And my response is, they scored more than that in 2019. They scored almost 47 points per game, and they weren't quite as dynamic throwing the ball that year. They could still throw the ball with Justin Fields, but they weren't quite as dynamic, but they were a more effective offense at scoring points because they could run the ball. And so the offensive line has talent, Vince. You've got obviously Paris Johnson Jr. at left tackle. You've got DeJuan Jones at right tackle, who I'm not super high on. You've got Donovan Jackson starting at guard, who was a former 5-star recruit. Matthew Jones is a really physical, tough kid, not as talented as the other guys, but tough and physical. Same with Luke Whippler, not the elite, potential future first-round pick like Paris Johnson, but a tough, hard-nosed kid from Jersey. They got the tools to be a good offensive line. It's how quickly can they get it going, which is a very similar question to Notre Dame offensive line. So Notre Dame's defensive line is going to have a battle in their hands. Now, they're capable of winning this matchup, but they need to do it. If Notre Dame's going to have success in this game, Vince, it can't just be, we outplayed their front, because that happened in 2020 against Alabama. And I don't care what anybody says. You go back and watch that game. The Notre Dame defensive line outplayed the Alabama defensive line in the Rose Bowl in 2018 or 2020. The problem, however, is that they didn't dominate the matchup. So them winning the matchup meant they were getting penetration, they were getting pressures, they were forcing bounces, but they weren't making plays on the quarterback. They weren't getting sacks. They weren't getting tackles for loss. They weren't dominating the matchup and putting Alabama behind the sticks. And that was the reason Alabama was able to go out and still move the ball at will against Notre Dame, because they could then expose the advantage they had on the perimeter. So if you want to have a chance of success against this offense, you can't let C.J. Stroud get into rhythm. But more importantly, you can't let Ohio State establish a run game. If they're able to come out and establish a run game early, now all of a sudden life is much easier on C.J. Stroud, and you're not going to have much of a chance to shut down this offense. So dominating in the trenches is going to be a very important key for Notre Dame. Are they capable of it? Yes.
Yeah.
Doing it, saying it, and doing it are much different things, and doing it is possible, but it's not going to be easy. This isn't Virginia's offensive line, right? This isn't USC's offensive line. This is a more talented offensive line that's got some guys moving around. Paris Johnson's going from right guard to left tackle. That's not an easy transition to play right-handed to left-handed. Now, he is a natural left tackle in that's where he played, but he didn't play it all of last year. Guard is different footwork. It's different technique. Right. He was playing right-handed instead of being left-handed. Ask any offensive lineman, that is not an easy transition to make. It takes time. You don't want to be trying to make that transition while going up against Isaiah Foskey and Riley Mills, right? That's going to be the key. So, and they're big and physical up the middle, right? So that means Jason Adamiola, Howard Cross, Jacob Lacey need to use their athleticism and quickness to be able to hold up and make plays and penetrate. So it's really keeping Ohio State off balance, forcing them to make quicker decisions, and not letting them get in a rhythm. If you do that, you got a chance. If you can't do that, then it's going to be a long day for Notre Dame. They're capable of it, Vince.
Right.
Right. It's just Or can they do it?
So I'm going to flip the script, and we're running a teensy-weensy short on time, but that's, whatever. It's all good. We can do it. I do want to flip the script, go to the other side of the ball. Notre Dame's offense. Again, if you're outside of the Notre Dame community, that's a giant question mark for everybody. They don't, new quarterback, no depth at wide receiver, no depth at running back. They lost their best running back, right? I mean, you can go down the list. Tyler Buckner, and we've talked about this in the past, over the week, over the last 8 months, he's kind of the X factor to what Notre Dame can do against Ohio State. So what can people expect, both nationally, Notre Dame fans, Ohio State fans, whoever? What can they expect from Tyler Buckner in this game? What says Brian Driscoll about Tyler Buckner?
Well, I don't know what to expect right now, right? That's the thing, because we haven't seen him in this role. I think the one thing we can expect to see is he's going to make plays with his legs. That's the one thing that we know about Tyler Buckner. He's going to make plays with his legs. The question, however, is this Notre Dame offense is not going to be elite unless Tyler Buckner can make plays with his arm. Now, I'm not one of those people that subscribes to the theory that, well, last year, that's who Tyler Buckner is. No, he was playing a role last year.
Correct.
They were using his athleticism last year. But we've got to see him, Vince. We've seen the anticipation in practice. We've seen it in the Blue Gold game his freshman year. We've seen it in high school. We've seen the ability to get the ball out on time, if not early, throwing guys open, all that kind of stuff. But we haven't seen it done in front of 105, 110,000 people in a live televised night game. Those are the things that we need to learn about Tyler Buckner. But honestly, he is the key in my view. I think Notre Dame has better talent at receiver than people give him credit for. We'll hear a little bit of that, I believe, in the interview coming up here with Brendan, which we recorded last night. I had to cut a couple segments out, but I believe one of the segments I left in was him talking about the receivers at Notre Dame and how they're not that good and all that kind of stuff. And I love Brendan, but, I understand why people think that, right?
Sure.
Despite the fact that Lorenzo Styles had more catches as a freshman than Marvin Harrison and Emeka Egbuka combined. Yeah. Besides that, he is a guy that there's just not a lot of faith in. So I think the pass catchers are good enough. It's, can Tyler Buckner get them the ball? Can he avoid the bad turnovers? The ones that give Ohio State a 30-yard field,
right?
Or take points off the board for you in the red zone, things like that. Can he make the big plays with his arm? Can he get the ball down the field? Can he be effective on first down and get the chains moving and those kind of things? That's what you're going to do, Vince, because I think the offensive line is going to have a good night. I think the skill talent is there. It's just about, can the trigger man get the ball where it needs to go to on time, accurately, and give those guys a chance to be effective. Because I do like the weapons that Notre Dame is bringing to the table, and I just need to see the quarterback get the ball. I mean, look, everybody talks about, the scheme is great and all that kind of stuff, and Jim Knowles is going to get it going. But look, this is still a team in Ohio State that, in my opinion, really struggled to defend the pass last year. And it wasn't just scheme related. It wasn't. Denzel Burke's a good player. He's not Eli Apple. Cam Brown's a good player. I don't see him being Jerry Conley at this point, right? The safeties, Ronnie Hickman, really good run defender. Can he cover? It's a different conversation, right? And those are the things that Notre Dame needs to be able to test that. But it won't matter if the trigger man can't get the ball where it needs to go.
And that's the key. He's got weapons. He needs to spread the ball around. He needs to be the ultimate point guard. And we've talked about that in the past. But not only just a point guard, but he also needs to make plays himself. And I think that's where, again, this is projecting. This is me being an analyst. I think that's where people are going to be the most surprised with Tyler Buckner is his accuracy and what he's able to do, pushing the ball down the field, getting the ball where it needs to go, and then also – what we already know is that he can be dynamic with his legs as well. So I just can't wait, man. I cannot wait to hear what people have to say about Tyler Buckner. I hope he has the game that I think he can have. It's a big stage for your first start. No doubt about it. Everybody's worried that he's not going to be able to handle the pressure and the atmosphere and all of those different things. And I don't see it. I don't see it. I think he is going to be able to handle those things. We shall see. The proof is in the pudding at 7:30 tonight, and that can't get here soon enough. But as you alluded to, we do have an interview with an Ohio State beat writer. I'll let you set it up. You had the interview. It was, in full disclosure, it was done last night just for time purposes and, availabilities and all of those different things. But this is a really interesting interview, so I'll let you set it up, Brian.
Yeah, actually, I introduced it in the video, so let's just get that sucker rocking and rolling. To get an inside look at the Ohio State Buckeyes, we are joined by Brendan Gulick, the publisher of Buckeyes Now, which is a part of the Fan Nation network that Irish Breakdown is also a part of. You can also find Brendan's work on his YouTube channel, Buckeyes Now, and his podcast, Buckeyes Now. So, Brendan, I know you're a very, very busy man. You've got the Buckeyes channel that you're working. You're also running the Cleveland Guardians channel. We got basketball seasons right around the corner. I know you run a Cleveland Cavaliers channel as well. But you know what? Right now, Brendan, there is nothing more important than Notre Dame versus Ohio State. So wanted to get his opinion on just where things stands with the Buckeyes. Brendan is my favorite follow on the Ohio State beat. So definitely check out his site. Very good stuff. Brendan, thanks for joining us today, buddy.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to help. I appreciated your perspective. I know our listeners really enjoyed some of the comments that you had when you joined our show earlier. And before we go any further, man, just want to let you guys know that certainly keeping Sean in our prayers. I know things are a little up in the air for him right now. He'll be okay, but he's in our thoughts and prayers. So hang in there to Sean.
Appreciate that very, very, very much. So, Brendan, let's talk about Ohio State. And we're going to talk a little big picture here before we dive into the specifics of this Notre Dame-Ohio State matchup. You go into year 4 of the Ryan Day tenure, correct? This is year 4 of his tenure. Yep. So his first full recruiting class sort of heads into their senior seasons. What are expectations for Ohio State this year? Obviously, there's the general, national, but is it at the point now in year 4 where it's like, hey, look, it's kind of take that next step?
No, I really think for as much as the hyperbole exists, and it always exists around the biggest programs in the country that have those lofty expectations, I'm not so sure that last year it was fair to say national championship or bust, because you had no idea what you were going to get out of your quarterback. You think you got talented guys in the roster, but this isn't a game of hypotheticals. You got to go do it. And until you see what CJ Stroud or Kyle McCord or Jack Miller or Quinn Ewers had, you didn't really know for sure what the season was going to look like. I feel like 2022 reminds me more going into this season of what we all sort of hoped 2020 was going to be. The Buckeyes had a great team in 2019 with an unbelievable defense, a really talented offense in Justin Fields' first year, and all the reason in the world to feel the motivation of coming off of losing to Clemson in a game that Buckeye fans feel like was stolen from them. And then COVID happened, and it was, are we going to have a year? Or are we not going to have a year? Had several games canceled. I know we saw essentially the rematch with Clemson in the Sugar Bowl, and the Buckeyes got their revenge. They go and play Alabama, and they're missing a whole bunch of players because of COVID. It just felt like they played the national title game with their hand, one hand tied behind their back. And Alabama was elite. I don't know the Buckeyes would have won the game.
They were going to have a hard time winning. Yeah, they were going to have a hard time winning that game even if they were healthy. That was just a great Bama team.
For sure. It left you feeling frustrated because it was like, hey, you get a chance to play for the national championship, and then things just fell apart. So I feel like when we kick off the 2022 season, Ryan Day's 34-4. That's preposterous. I mean, that doesn't happen. Certainly not at major college football level. He didn't lose a Big Ten game until the last Big Ten game of the year last year over his first 4 years, 23-1. This program has been building toward being the last team standing. And last year, the reason they weren't able to get over the hump was because the defense wasn't good enough. They weren't abysmal, but they weren't even close to being as good, maybe to that Ohio State standard. They certainly weren't what they were in 2019. And so, again, got to go prove it, got to see what you have on that side of the ball. But there really are no questions around the offense. You kind of know what you have. You feel better about the offensive line because you actually have tackles playing tackle and guards playing guard. This team is going to go as far as the defense can take it. And there were noticeable signs of improvement throughout the year last year. I think we're going to talk a little bit about the revamped coaching staff, much of which is on the defensive side of the ball. It's time to go prove it. You don't win games by talking and writing and chirping. So let's see what they got. But there's a lot of people feeling pretty good about where the defense is at the start of the year.
You've got a lot of new faces and new places. Let's kind of talk about some of those new faces, Brendan, and who do you think is going to the guys that kind of need to make the biggest impact for Ohio State when you look at the new coaches on the staff?
I mean, I feel like it's low-hanging fruit, but I think it has to start with Jim Knowles. Ryan Day hired him to basically be the head coach of the defense. Last year, game 1 didn't go great, but the Buckeyes beat Minnesota. And by Ohio State standards, game 2 was a disaster. It was an unmitigated disaster. Oregon clobbered the Buckeyes. And I know the scoreboard didn't reflect a blowout, but I mean, they ran the same play several times and kept ripping off huge, huge gains. It's like, where's the adjustment? Even after halftime, figure it out. And that's no offense to guys that I thought were really good coaches. Matt Barnes is a defensive coordinator for a reason. He's moved on to Memphis now. I love Kerry Combs. I think Kerry's a great, great guy. And he was the perfect Mr. Buckeye on the coaching staff. Just didn't work for him as a defensive coordinator last year. Al Washington, there's a reason why he's coaching at Notre Dame right now. He's a really good coach. It was just time for a new voice or a new system or something. It wasn't a reflection of being bad at your job. So I think Jim Knowles is getting paid a boatload of money to get it right. On a personal standpoint, I love the guy. He's everything you want your defensive coordinator to be.
He is like the stereotypical defensive coordinator. He really is.
He's scruffy. He's got a low octave to his voice. He pulls the bill of his cap over his eyes. You can't really see him. He's a vegan and all he does is drink coffee out of a McDonald's cup. I mean, he's just kind of like that. It's like the silent assassin kind of guy, And I mean, look, if it doesn't work, we're going to think it's cheesy. If it works, everybody's going to think he's a cult hero. But you get the impression that that's who he is. And he's kind of setting that tone of, we're here to be stupid aggressive and to bring the silver bullets back. And I think the rest of the especially the defensive coaches that came on and Perry Eliano and then former Buckeye Tim Walton. And Larry Johnson is, I mean, look, man, he's one of, if not the greatest defensive line coach in college football history. His resume is unbelievable. And even as he is seasoned in his career, he's got a lot of energy and he's still doing a heck of a job. So, I think the mindset of the defense has changed. I as an Ohio State fan, I hate losing to Michigan.
Sure.
But I almost feel like every once in a while you kind of need to be reminded why it's a rivalry. Right. And sometimes it's good to lose a game like that because it can fuel your program for more than just the next season. And Ohio State was pretty sick and tired of hearing all off season how soft they were. Now we're going to find out what they did about it when they go out and play an offensive line that, much like Ohio State's defense last year, was young and inexperienced and looking to figure it out. Notre Dame's offensive line is basically bringing everybody back. I hope Patterson is healthy. Even if he's not, it's a good line. And this game is going to be won and lost at the line of scrimmage, in my opinion.
So let's ask this, Brendan. I want to just talk a little bit about matchups. As you're sitting in the stands and, you've kind of broken this team down and you're ready to kind of say, okay, we've talked Ohio State and Notre Dame, very similar situations, a lot of new coaches, a lot of new faces, saying all the right things, hearing all the right things. When you sit down and you watch that game, give me a matchup or two on both sides of the, on each side of the ball that you're going to be looking at to say, okay, if the things that we think are going to happen positively for Ohio State are going to happen, it's going to manifest in this matchup or in that matchup, meaning not necessarily the coaching changes, but if the Buckeyes are going to be the team that people think they're going to be, I have the Ohio State in the college football playoff, so I think they're going to be pretty good. What are the matchups you're looking for in that game to say, okay, yes, we've heard all this. if this team is going to be as good as we think it is, because these matchups are going to be ones they thrive in.
I mean, I don't think it's any secret that Ohio State feels they can throw the ball on anybody. Even before Ryan Day became the head coach, in his 5 years or since 2017, so he was not the head coach his first 2 years in the program. But in his 5 years so far, Ohio State has had 40 plus points per game on average every year. And 2 of the last 3 years, they've either led the country or been top 3 in the country offensively, largely predicated on their ability to throw the ball. Dwayne Haskins could throw it. Justin Fields could throw it. CJ Stroud can really throw it. And they've got the weapons to do it at wide receiver. There have been a lot of questions recently to Jackson Smith and Jigba. Hey, do you think you can have 2,000 receiving yards this year? I mean, I'm sure he probably could. I really don't think that's good for the Buckeyes. They don't need that. He had the Big Ten record last year, 1,606 receiving yards. And obviously everybody remembers what he did in the Rose Bowl when he set an all-time bowl record and went, bananas. I just don't think, while he is capable of playing at that elite level, what makes Ohio State good right now is its depth of talent. Marvin Harrison Jr. is really, really good. Emeka Egbuka is really, really good. Julian Fleming was the top-rated wide receiver in the country when he came out of high school, and he's shown flashes of it a little bit. He's just been battling injuries. Everybody in that facility has said Julian had an unbelievable offseason. He was one of 7 guys on the team that they named an Iron Buckeye. He's healthy, and he's going to see the field. So between Fleming and Egbuka and Harrison and obviously Smith and Jigba, CJ Stroud's going to have the ability to throw the football. When Ohio State last year got a little out of whack, it was in instances where maybe they wanted to run and couldn't, or where they got in places in the game where they just, like against Michigan late, they really couldn't afford to run it. They were chasing the game. They had to throw. I think Ryan Day is going to want to almost like overdo the rushing attack on Saturday. I think he really wants to prove a point with how physical they are. And I actually almost wonder if it might be to their detriment, because as I give you that long-winded explanation,
hey, this is Irish Breakdown, man. Long-winded explanations are a common thing. Okay, so you are good. That is part of it, buddy. So you are good, man.
I think Brandon Joseph is elite, and I think Cam Hart's really good. I don't know exactly how those guys are going to line up on any given play or who they're going to cover. But because Ohio State has the depth of talent that it does at that spot, if you're throwing away from Joseph or away from Hart, and I'm not trying to be offensive to the other guys that are going to start. It looks like Clarence Lewis might be the other corner and DJ Brown may be the opposite safety. If I'm CJ Stroud and I know what I got, I'm going to make those guys prove it. I think the offensive line is going to have their hands full, but I don't think CJ is going to be running for his life. So key matchup, whoever isn't offensively going up against Joseph or Hart. While keeping in mind that I think the Buckeyes are going to try really hard to establish, I would be floored if Ohio State's first offensive play of the game is not a Travion Henderson run. I'd be shell-shocked. I think they want to go out and prove we can be a tough physical football team. Mayan Williams is going to get a bunch of carries. I think those two are probably going to have something like 25 to 30 carries on Saturday. And I wouldn't be surprised if Mayan Williams has 10 or 11 of those. But specific matchups, whoever in the secondary is working opposite of Joseph and opposite of Hart, I think could be spots the Buckeyes try to exploit.
So what about when the Buckeyes are on defense? What are the matchups that are going to let you know, hey, this defense has got a chance to turn this thing around because this is a matchup that they're having success with?
So I like Notre Dame's offensive line quite a bit. I'm not sold on their wide receivers. I think that group could be okay, but it's just unproven. So I don't know how comfortable Tyler Buckner is going to be if guys get in tight spots, maybe an early drop, like maybe that rattles a kid in his first start. I would expect that Notre Dame is going to try to run the ball and try to find Michael Mayer as often as possible, because I think he's the best player on either side for the Irish. I am a little concerned at how the Buckeyes are going to try to find a way to stop Michael Mayer. I don't think it's going to be one guy in particular. I think they're going to have to try to rotate different looks at him. I don't know for sure that Tommy Eichenberg is the right answer for that. Mayer has a fairly decisive size advantage against Steele Chambers.
Against every linebacker he's going to face this year.
Yeah, but Steele can move better than Eichenberg can.
Right.
The one guy that I would be really intrigued to see with Mayer one-on-one would be Chip Trainum. I think he could potentially be problematic for Mayer. Diamante Trainum, for those who don't know, he's a Northeast Ohio kid, wanted to play running back instead of linebacker out of high school, went to Archbishop Hoban. He was a several-time state champion, played for the best high school football team in the state of Ohio, regardless of which division they played in. They were awesome. The Buckeyes wanted him to play linebacker out of high school, and he basically said no thanks. He went to Arizona State to be a running back. Didn't go the way he wants, so he transferred back, and now he's in Columbus. I think he's the real deal. He's really, really special. I don't know how often he's going to get on the field, because it sounds like Jim Knowles really doesn't want to play the same depth at linebacker and defensive back that we saw last year. He's willing to rotate 12 to 14 guys up front, but it sounds like he doesn't want to play quite as many, extra guys in his back seven. So I am a little concerned about who is going to guard Mayer. And I think it's going to put a lot of pressure on the linebacking core in particular when Notre Dame prioritizes running the football. Mm-hmm. Last year, Ronnie Hickman led the team in tackles by a lot. Hickman told us this week that he feels things are different because last year, too often, opposing running backs were getting to him untouched. And now, in practice, the defense has gotten good enough to the point that Hickman's not making solo tackles anymore. That's kind of how he has been able to judge, hey, things are getting better from this perspective. So whoever's guarding Mayer is going to have a tough assignment. And whichever safety who's down in the box or linebacker that has the ability to make a one-on-one tackle on a running back has to get the job done.
That is going to do it. Let everybody know where they can find you. Obviously, your website, your Twitter, and all your other channels. Let people know where they can find your work.
Yeah, appreciate that. I'm a busy guy. I'm in a lot of places. All the Ohio State stuff, if you're interested, BuckeyesNow.com is the website home for that. Our social channels are Buckeyes Now SI. And then our podcast is called Buckeye Breakdown. You can find that on YouTube. And much like what you guys are doing here, we're kind of simulcasting that so that it's both live on YouTube, but then it's available wherever you like to get your podcast after that. For anybody that might be interested in your audience, if you're a baseball fan or basketball fan, I cover the Cleveland Guardians. That's Cleveland Baseball Insider. It's also in our Fan Nation network. Just about to launch the Cavs site. CavsInsider.com will be the site there. And things in the NBA got real interesting yesterday when the Cavs traded for Donovan Mitchell. So pretty excited about that.
Yeah.
That was pretty cool. My personal Twitter handle is Brendan Gulick 22. You can see my name spelled there on the bottom and 22 on the end. And then I do a lot of play-by-play beyond that. So you might see me on some different platforms. I do some Olympic sports on Big Ten Network. I do a lot of Division II and Division III NCAA championships on NCAA.com. I do some selection shows for them. Lots of different, ESPN Plus platforms for different stuff. So I'm in a lot of places. I'm easy to get a hold of if you're trying to poke fun at me or get a hold of me, whatever you want.
So there you go, Vince. That was my interview with Brendan Gulick. Very good dude. Like you said, if you're a Guardians fan, it's the Guardians, right? It's the name of their baseball team now.
Yeah,
or a Cavs fan. Check.
If I'm insulting any Cleveland fans, but
whatever.
It's so much better with the name.
It's dumb.
So much better.
Anyway, so that was the interview with Brendan Gulick. And he's pretty tame for the Ohio State expectations. But
Fair.
So the fact that somebody asked, "Hey, you think 2,000 receiving yards is possible?" Like, come on, guys. Like,
Right.
whatever.
It just goes to show you that nationally and on the Ohio State side, there is no path for Notre Dame to win this game.
No,
this is a preseason opener for Ohio State that they're,
There was a guy on Ohio State fan on YouTube. He's like, "You're such a homer. When was the last time Ohio State scored only 26 points?" And I was like, in November against Nebraska. Like, dude, you lost 2 games last year, scoring 28, 27 points. Don't act like I'm absurd for thinking Notre Dame might have a chance to hold you to 26. It's comical at this point. And that's why I love the Ohio State fans that have jumped in our chat, the ones that we've allowed to stay. Because, like, yeah, they think their team's really flipping good, but there's at least some level of respect for Notre Dame in the conversation. You don't get that in a lot of places. But you know what we said the other day, Sean, or Vince, is respect is earned. You know what I mean? Respect is earned. You don't just get respect because you're Notre Dame. You got to earn respect, and Notre Dame hasn't earned that respect in a long time. And tonight's another chance to do that. But it's very interesting.
Yes.
Very interesting.
This is one of my favorite parts of the show, Brian, and we're going to bring you in on the tradition here. It is time for rapid fire. We've got some questions here. Most of them have to do with kind of our season predictions for this Notre Dame team, specifically what we anticipate, what we think, and some other fun ones thrown in as well. So here we go. Are you ready for some rapid fire, Brian?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So let's start with some overall team predictions for Notre Dame. Who do you think is going to be the Notre Dame defensive MVP and offensive MVP when it's all said and done at the end of the season?
Well, defensive MVP, when we did our show, I believe it was Brandon Joseph. That's what I went with there.
Yep.
Offensive MVP, I'm going to go with Michael Mayer. So I'm going to take the easy one on offense, just because even when his numbers aren't going to be, necessarily where they need to be, it's going to be because he's playing great and teams are focused on trying to stop him. And that's why he is my pick for the most valuable player. Maybe not most outstanding or whatever, but most valuable. I think it's going to be him. And I'm not going to take the easy route and go, quarterback, okay. Michael Mayer is going to be the most valuable player on that offense because his presence will then make Tyler Buckner better as opposed to necessarily the other way around.
That's fair. I am also going with Joseph on defense, but I am taking the easy route, and I'm taking Tyler Buckner.
Slacker.
I know. I just think the whole season kind of rides on what he can do, and if he's not who we think he is, I don't think the season's going to go the way we think it is. So I have to go with Tyler Buckner. So breakout player on both sides of the ball. Brian, go.
My breakout player on offense is going to be Braden Lindsey. I do think Braden is going to become a very key part of this football team. I think he's going to be a big play threat. I think we're going to see a lot more of the 2019 version of Braden Lindsey, but a little bit thicker, stronger version of it on offense. And he is going to be a very key part of this as everybody's focusing on Mayer and Styles and Tyree and, of course, Buckner. They're going to be like, we don't worry about number 0. And number 0 is going to say, yeah, it's probably a bad idea. And so he's going to be my breakout player on defense. Or on offense. My breakout player on defense, I've been back and forth on this, Vince, a lot of different ways. I'm going to go with Maris Liufau. I think he's going to be healthy. I think he's going to have a big year. As long as he plays 12 games in the regular season, I think Maris is going to have big-time numbers, big-time production, and be very important to this team. And he's going to go from a guy with 20-some career tackles to one of the better linebackers in the Midwest, if not the country. So he's going to be my breakout player on defense.
So for offense, for me, I'm going with your all-time favorite player's number, and I'm going to go with Chris Tyree, number 25. I think that he has an opportunity to be very special, both in the run game and the pass game. I think he's going to be a key cog to this offense and what they want to do. So you're going to see him moving all over the place. One of the keys for any defense that's going to play Notre Dame is going to be you've got to find, of course, 87, but you're also going to have to be able to locate 25. And I think there's going to be a lot of matchup disparities in Notre Dame's favor when 25 is either split out, if he gets the ball between the tackles. I don't care. I think Chris Tyree is going to have a breakout season as the main cog behind Tyler Buckner or beside Tyler Buckner, depending on how you look at it. Defensively, this one's a little bit harder, but I'm going to go with Riley Mills. And I know that might be a cop-out as well. But I think, obviously Isaiah Foskey is going to get a lot of attention. Jason Ademilola is going to get a lot of attention. There's going to be a lot of guys getting a lot of attention.
I don't think that's a cop-out, Vince. I think that's that would have been my number 2.
Right.
So you're good.
just feels like Riley Mills is on the verge of having a breakout season because he's going to be dealing with a lot of one-on-ones. And even as the season progresses,
Hold on a second, Vince. Hold on a second.
Oh, what do you got?
That's Cam Hart wanting to know why you're off of the train since you picked him to be your breakout player earlier in the week. He wants to know why he's no longer your breakout player. So I just wanted to find out why Cam wasn't your pick as breakout player anymore.
That's fair. That's fair. I might have to give up my role in our fan club. But I did go Riley Mills for this show. Hey, I'm allowed to change my mind.
I know. And it's just of all the things I thought you might have changed your mind on, I didn't think that was going to be the one. So,
oh, you crack me up, dude. Okay, so you called me out on my stuff, and you're right about that, but I'm still going to go with Riley Mills for this show. Even when he starts putting up numbers, you can't ignore the other guys. You can't ignore Foskey, and you can't ignore Adam Alola, and you can't. And so I think he's going to get one-on-ones a lot. So I like it. I like where, Riley Mills is going to be. And yes, of course, I love me some Cam Hart. Still going All-American for Cam Hart. Yeah, I think he's going to be really good.
Your answer should have been, no, since this is my show, I'm changing the terms for breakout, and it's going to go from a guy who wasn't a starter and already a good player to someone who's going to become that. That should have been your response.
Right.
Come on, Vince. I taught you nothing. Sorry, I'm derailing things. I apologize.
Good stuff. All right, this is a softball question, but who's your freshman of the year on offense and your freshman of the year on defense?
It's Tobias Merriweather and Jaden Mickey. I mean, this is a pretty easy one. And I know we'll talk more about Tobias here in a minute, so I won't get too much into that. Jaden Mickey, I think, is going to be the guy. I can see Benjamin Morrison becoming that. I could see Junior Tuihalamaka. I could see, one of the freshman defensive linemen stepping up. But Jaden Mickey being an early enrollee, being an incredibly confident kid, being a very talented kid, being someone who can play some nickel, which can then give you some opportunities to maybe get Tariq Bracy outside at times as well. I think it's really, really important. They're going to need him to be the top rookie on defense, and I think he will be the top rookie on defense.
All right.
Will he finish his career as the best guy from that class on defense? Maybe, maybe not, but I definitely think he'll be I feel confident that he'll be the best as a freshman.
Well, and he had the advantage of coming in, obviously, in the spring, and I think, if Benjamin Morrison had come in the spring, then we might be having a debate right now. You know what I mean? And I just think, Jaden Mickey had that opportunity. He seized it. He did everything he was supposed to do. And that's a huge opportunity. I mean, it's a huge opportunity. So, yeah, I agree with you. I'm not going to beat a dead horse here. Those are the two guys that I had as my freshman, MVPs as well. Let's move on to a fill in the blank, Brian. Vegas, in all of their infinite wisdom, we all know that they have Notre Dame as a 17.5-point dog in this game, but they also have set Notre Dame's season over-under win total at 8.5. It would be blank if the Irish finish the season with 8 or fewer wins.
Devastating. Yeah.
No, absolutely.
I mean, I just don't. It's the same thing last year, Vince. Remember, it was like 7.5 last year. And we were like, what the world? Like, are we missing something? And that team played bad last year. I mean, they were their execution for most of the year, especially on offense, was kind of mediocre all year. They were bad for what Notre Dame is supposed to be, and they still won 11 games. Yeah. So I don't understand it. I don't see so I'm supposed to have more faith in USC, who went 4-8 last year over Notre Dame. It just doesn't make any sense. And I don't think it's about Marcus Freeman as much as it's just a lack of faith in Notre Dame. I understand Notre Dame being a 17.5-point favorite against Ohio State. I get that one. The 8.5 win total is kind of absurd to me, and that's disrespectful. Like, what does this team need to do? They've literally won minimum 9 games in the regular season each of the last 5 years. The only year that they didn't win 10 games in the regular season was 2017, a year after they went 4-8, and they did that against a schedule that had 7 ranked opponents in the regular season. That makes no sense. And if they're right and Notre Dame wins 8 or fewer, that's devastating. We'll crush the recruiting momentum. Right. It'll rightfully raise major doubts about, okay, was this the right hire? Is the talent level what we think it is? It would be devastating if Notre Dame wins 8 or fewer games. I mean, 9-3 would be disappointing, barring something crazy. 8-4 would be devastating.
I use the word shocking because I would be absolutely floored if that actually took place, because I have a really hard time finding 4 teams on this schedule that Notre Dame will lose to all of them. Now, could I make a case that there's 4 teams on the schedule that Notre Dame could possibly lose to, go 3-1 against that set, or 2-2? Okay, we can have that conversation, but I just don't see them losing all 4. Going 8-4 would be incredibly disappointing. It would be shocking. Like, there would have to be 3 or 4 just devastating injuries for that to happen. Maybe even more than that, to be honest with you. Like season enders early on. And even then, this roster is pretty deep to where they're still going to get there.
Vince, in 2015, they lost their start. By the end of the second game of the year, they had lost their starting quarterback, their starting running back, their starting tight end, their starting nose guard, and their starting nickel. They had lost all of them. And then by the, I think the 5th game, they had also lost Drew Tranquil. And that team still went 10-2 in the regular season and almost beat Clemson, who was the national runners-up, almost beat Stanford, who finished the year top 5. Yet I'm supposed to believe that this team is going to go 8-4.
Right.
I
don't see it. It's stupid, but it's free money in my pocket. So go ahead and set that number at 8.5, and I'll be celebrating by game 9 or 10. So that's just fine. Yep. Okay. Next up on the list. Whose freshman receiving line will Tobias Merriweather's line most resemble at the end of the season? And I got some choices for you.
Okay.
Floyd had 48 catches for 719 yards and 7 touchdowns.
He was good.
He was real good.
Back in 08. It was good.
Kevin Stefferson, 25 catches, 462 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Or TJ Jones, 23 catches, 306 yards, and 3 scores.
If I'm going to go with Kevin Stefferson being my first thought. I think, conservatively, if I'm right about Braden Lindsey and Lorenzo Styles, and I think Jade Thomas is going to have a quality year. You've got the tight end. I think that Kevin Stefferson's numbers are much more reasonable.
Right.
I think it's not reasonable, realistic as far as a preseason prediction. Can I throw like a little asterisk in there, Vince?
Of course.
If I'm wrong and it's another one of the 2 players, I predict it'll be closer to Michael Floyd's numbers than TJ Jones.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think if I'm wrong and he's not around, 25 catches, 400 some yards, 5 TDs, if I'm wrong and that's not the range, I think the range will be higher, not lower.
Okay. Very interesting. I think we're going to get a heavy dose of Tobias Merriweather today. I think it may not be his coming out party.
That would surprise me a little bit. I think if they're throwing him a ton of balls in the opener against Ohio State, that would surprise me a little bit.
I think he's going to get a lot of opportunity. Again, I don't know what that necessarily will look like from a stat line, but I think he's going to be out there and he's going to get playing time. I had a hard time with this one because it's funny because Kevin Stefferson's catch is 25 versus TJ Jones' catch is 23, but you had a 150-yard difference with yardage and a 2 touchdown difference, right?
And TJ played a lot more too.
Absolutely.
I mean, Kevin wasn't. Yeah, Kevin didn't start early. I mean, I don't think he caught a pass in the opener. He had another game with no catches. He had a game with 1 catch. TJ was a starter at game 1. If you remember, TJ scored a touchdown in the second game of the year. Remember, he had that long touchdown they ran a flood concept on a sprint out, and Dan Chris hit him over the top for a touchdown. I mean, he was a starter basically for that team.
Right. And that's the thing. Kevin Stefferson almost felt like a package wide receiver as a freshman. Like he didn't. Right. I don't know. So
at least early second half of the year, he was pretty stinking good. But
I think Tobias Merriweather is going to get time earlier than we saw Kevin Stefferson get time. So I will say that. So yeah, I agree with you. I think it is Kevin Stefferson's numbers. If he eclipses 500 yards, I would be a little bit surprised, but ecstatic. Obviously, I don't know that his touchdowns are necessarily going to be that high, but he's such a big target in the end zone, in the red zone, that I don't know how you don't go to him. How do you not put Mayer on one side and Tobias Merriweather on the other side and hope for good things? You know what I mean? You got options at that point. So maybe I'm wrong. We'll see what happens. I just don't know that his touchdown numbers are going to be that high. Please prove me wrong, Tobias Merriweather. I will say that. Okay, next one. Which number will be greater this season? Michael Mayer's touchdown catches or Isaiah Foskey's sack total?
So are you saying will Mayer have more touchdowns this year than Foskey has sacks this year, or will Okay, I'm going to go with Foskey and sacks.
Okay.
Yeah, if you're going to ask me who has a better chance of surpassing the number they had last year, I'd go with probably Mayer.
Okay.
But if between the two, I'm definitely going Foskey. I could see him having 9 or 10 sacks, taking a step back numbers wise, but being a better pass rusher because it means his teammates are getting more sacks, because they're trying to avoid him, like stepping away from him into Riley Mills's hands or into Coward Cross's arms or whatever. But yeah, of those two, I'm definitely going Isaiah Foskey.
Yeah.
If I'm wrong, it's either Michael Mayer has a monster year, which would be great, or something went wrong with Isaiah Foskey.
Right. And I'm predicting, we had some Isaiah Foskey questions, earlier on, and I just feel like Isaiah Foskey is going to have a year. He's got a great chance to break the modern sack record at Notre Dame. I think he's got a great opportunity at that. I believe it's 13 and a half, something along those lines. And, he had 10 or he had 11 last year. Right. And I just feel like that's going to be a great opportunity for him. I think he can get it, even with all the extra attention that he's going to get. We talked about Riley Mills earlier. Yeah, I think he's going to be great. And I just, if teams allow Michael Mayer to have 14 touchdowns, then Notre Dame is going to be really, really good offensively. So I agree with you. I think it is going to be Foskey. So let's burn through some of these here kind of quickly. Over under 35.5 total touchdowns for Tyler Buckner this season. So throwing and running.
Over. I predicted 40. My bold prediction this year was 40. I think even 36, 37 is in line with what we've seen from other quarterbacks. I think his running ability will boost his overall touchdown number. So I am going over.
Okay. Very good. Very good. Okay. Here it is. Let's go with our season predictions for Notre Dame. Give me the record. Give me what bowl they're going to be in, and their postseason destination. Obviously, bowl and postseason could be the same thing, but give me your prediction for where you see this team going this year.
I'm still where I was at last week. I'm 11-1. I don't know who they're going to lose to. Could be tonight. Could be down the road. I think going undefeated is hard. I think 11-1 is my pick, and I think they will play in the Fiesta Bowl this year in the postseason, which, of course, as you know, is a part of the college football playoff.
Yeah, that it is. Another return trip to the desert.
I went Fiesta Bowl because I think the Peach Bowl is the other one.
It is.
And you'll see like an SEC team probably there in the way that I think that, so it could be there.
So they get the option of going either one, right?
Right. So if Bama's the 1 seed, then I could see Notre Dame being in the Peach Bowl against Bama. If Bama's the 2 seed, I could see Notre Dame in the Peach Bowl as the 3 seed. I'm just going Fiesta Bowl just because I think the geographic aspects of it will play out that way.
I enjoyed Arizona last time. So
yeah, it's a lot of fun.
All about a return trip.
Go-karting again. That was a lot of fun.
See, you left me out of that. Just saying.
Because you flew in late.
All right.
You were hanging out with your, father-in-law and stuff while we were having fun.
My first
totally kidding.
Anyway, so not to, belabor the point, I also had them 11-1. I think there will be a loss along the way. It's very hard to go undefeated. You mentioned that earlier in the show. I don't know where that loss is going to be. Don't pin me down to that one. Maybe it's today. Maybe it's later. I don't know. 11-1 just feels right to me. And I hate to say it, but 10 wins feels like a disappointment. It just does. And so it's 11-1. It's a college football playoff. An 11-1 Notre Dame team is getting into the college football playoff. I feel like that. And I don't care what bowl they go to, whether it's the Fiesta or the Peach, but I think they're going to be in the playoff. So that's my prediction for the season. Let's talk game prediction for today, Brian. We did post them on the website already yesterday. That's when our normal prediction goes out. But what is your prediction for this game tonight? Give me your score and give me a reason why.
I go 34-26 Notre Dame. I think that both teams are going to score 6 times. I think Notre Dame's going to have more touchdowns and Ohio State's going to have more field goals. I think Notre Dame's red zone defense is going to be key. I think that the defense is going to be harassing. I think they're going to be penetrating. I think it's going to result in Ohio State having some uncharacteristic mistakes, which also includes the fact that, Vince, as you know, the pass game does tend to take a little longer to get going than the run game. So if Notre Dame can slow down the run game, then I think they'll be able to create enough stops in the pass game to keep Ohio State's points down enough to win the game. And I think that they'll be able to run the ball effectively. I think we're going to see some big plays in the pass game. Especially early. I think Notre Dame is going to kind of get hot early, get some big plays, whether it's a screen that goes big, whether it's a shot over the top. I think that's how I see this game playing out. And, good weather, bad weather, it doesn't really change for me. The score doesn't change for me. I think it's going to be a 34-26 Notre Dame victory, but it's going to be a great game. I do anticipate this being a very, very good football game.
I hope you're right. That will make for such a sweet drive home. It'll make for such a sweet walk to the car after the game if Notre Dame is victorious. I'll just rip off all my Notre Dame stuff everywhere. It'll be fantastic. My prediction is a little bit different. I have Ohio State winning 31-28. I know. And I'm like, I'm a huge homer. I want Notre Dame to win this game. There's no question about it. I'm just not ready to go there yet. And as I sit here on September 3rd, this is the only game I will be picking Notre Dame to lose. This is the only one. I see them winning the rest of them. And I also see it being a game. I see it being 31-28. It's going to be a one-score game. It's going to come down to the end. There's no doubt about that. I think I'm really excited to see Al Golden's defense. I'm excited to see the creativity from Tommy Rees. And I think Tyler Buckner is going to surprise a lot of people. I think Notre Dame gets a lot of positive press out of this. I think they get a lot of positive momentum out of this, even if they do have a close loss. But I just can't pull the trigger. I just can't pull the trigger. I know I probably should be shunned and left for dead on the side of the road. But
the whole point of this, Vince, is to be objective. Right. I am giving my Notre Dame prediction because I honestly believe that's how the game is going to play out. You're giving your prediction because that's how you honestly believe the game is going to play out. And that's what we do here. We give you our honest – we may be wrong. One of us tonight will be wrong.
Yes, that's correct.
We came into this with that's how we see it playing out. So, right. And I do think the one thing we can agree on, the loser of this game doesn't lose again. The loser of this game will run the table. I have no doubt about that. I think these are two – like Ohio State fans saying, well, you don't respect Ohio State. No, I think Ohio State's really good. I probably think in the long same line, I think they're one of the 2 to 3 best teams in the country.
No doubt.
I just think this is a matchup that's good for Notre Dame, and I just think Notre Dame is a team that's going to win the game. But I think Ohio State, if they lose, if I'm right, Ohio State will not lose again, and I'm going to feel really bad for the teams they play this year the rest of the way because they're going to be pissed. And if Notre Dame loses, I feel the same way. As long as it's competitive, I'm like, okay, I kind of feel bad for the teams they're about to play because this team has a championship destiny in their minds and in their hearts, and they're going to know if they lose this game, we got to really take it out on some people, and I think that's what's going to happen. So,
gotcha. Okay, so those are our predictions.
Can we please pull this up before we get going? I know we got a couple other super chats that you and Ryan we'll get to before we get to the national stuff, but I thought this was just flipping hilarious. I'm sorry.
Bronx ND fan with the massive super chat. Thank you so much, Bronx. He goes, I'm back. So excited for this game. I might tackle my fiance when she gets home with the wings tonight. Prayers for Sean. Notre Dame wins with a game-winning field goal by Groupie. Let's go. Love it. Love it. That's what I'm talking about. That's the kind of enthusiasm that we want here at Irish Breakdown. Thank you, Bronx ND fan. Really, really appreciate it. So, without further ado, we're going to welcome Ryan Roberts to the Countdown to Kickoff show. My guy, we're going to talk a little recruiting. Yes, it's an away game, but it's still a massive recruiting weekend for Ohio State. And as we have chronicled in the past, Notre Dame and Ohio State are in on some of the same guys. And so they're going to have a front row seat to this Ohio State Notre Dame matchup. I also understand that one game does not necessarily make or break the recruiting of an athlete, but let's talk about who's going to be in attendance with a Notre Dame offer, a Notre Dame tie. You know, what does this look like? Ryan, go. What do you got for me?
Yeah, Vince, I mean, it's going to be a really interesting game. You know, I kind of wanted to put this list together because, I mean, like you said, they are both Midwestern powers, and they are going after a lot of the same players, which is going to be an interesting kind of conversation. You know, I think it's, you know, from a just general understanding, it's like, you know, Ohio State has, I think it's 66 players that are scheduled to be at this football game, which is just a ridiculous visitor number list. But when you look at kind of the 2024 and 2025 kids, there is about half are guys that Notre Dame and Ohio State are both targeting in this game. So, I mean, from guys like Aeneas Williams, who just scored 8 touchdowns last night for Hannibal out St. Louis, to Ryan Wingo, Jeremiah Smith, Edric Houston, Nigel Smith. It's a endless list. Sammy Brown. There is a lot of players on this list that Notre Dame should be really excited about. And I think it's a big opportunity for them to kind of crash the Ohio State party because they are bringing them in because they think that they're going to have a win today. And that's the reason that these guys are visiting campus but I think Notre Dame has a big opportunity to make a little bit of a statement today.
I'm jumping in because, look, I know that people don't want to hear this, but I do think Keon Keeley is a guy that tonight could be impactful for. Look, and I know that right now Notre Dame's not recruiting Keon, and I don't think Keon's thinking about coming back to Notre Dame. But I still think seeing them in person, seeing the players, seeing the people that he knows and cares about, and all that kind of stuff, is could have an impact. If I'm right on the prediction, Vince, then I think it's a situation where this could have a big impact on that. So,
and personally, I hope so, because Keon Keeley was obviously he's a stud, centerpiece of that recruiting class. It was devastating when he left, and he's going to have an opportunity to see Notre Dame in person against Ohio State. I mean, this is huge. This is massive, and I hope it makes a difference.
And I had to check. Did Ryan say that Aeneas Williams had 8 touchdowns last night?
Is
that what he said? I thought he said that. That was insane. Jaden Greathouse went off last night too.
8 touchdowns in a game, but there's that.
So I'll let you guys get back to it. I think we got that worked out.
So, Ryan, how do you feel like this game can impact some of the decisions, or is that even a thing? Can one game sway the opinion of a recruit when they're at a game watching 2 teams that they have high on their list?
Well, I mean, I think, Vince, when you have maybe if a player's on the fence with it's Ohio State, it's Notre Dame, and I think that could be a separating factor to a degree, right? But I think more than anything, you're talking about 2024 kids and 2025 kids. And when you have that kind of in mind, that you're talking about high school juniors and high school sophomores, I think if anything, it's just a momentum starter, right? And it's a momentum builder on Notre Dame's side. And honestly, there's been a lot of recruits that I've talked to, not 2024, not 2025, even 2023, that have said, I want to see what it looks like on the field. Like that's the remaining unknown. Everyone knows that Marcus Freeman has a electric personality. Everyone knows that he's built a good staff, in my opinion. Everybody knows that he is a great recruiter. All those things are known commodities at this point, but the unknown commodity is how it's going to translate to the field, right? So that's the biggest thing that I think that a lot of recruits are waiting to see. And I think that it does play into Notre Dame's favor, the fact that there's a lot of players that they're interested in that are going to have a firsthand look at this game, because there's an assumption. I mean, I was just looking at a bunch of Ohio State predictions this morning. Ohio State fans think that they're going to roll Notre Dame. They do. Absolutely. And you think about it like this too, Vince. I mean, Notre Dame has been a good team over the last couple of years, but during the majority of these kids, I mean, we're talking about 15, 16, maybe 17-year-olds, right? For the majority of their, time growing up here, Ohio State's been the team, and it's not been Notre Dame, right? So having this ability on a main stage in the shoe, 7:30 game, all those things added together, I think it is a momentous opportunity for Notre Dame to crash this party and have a big impact on recruiting.
Love it. Love it. All right, Ryan, I'm going to let you go. I'm going to let you enjoy your Saturday of college football, baby. We're 31 minutes away from kickoff of some great games, and it's going to be just an all-day party. And so I look forward to talking to you tonight.
Yeah, he's got to get some rest, because this is going to be his first post-game show.
Yeah. When the game is over, you put the women and children to bed. We're going to have a post-game show.
Literally.
I know.
Literally for Ryan.
That's what I'm saying. Literally. We're going to have a post-game show. It's going to be you. It's going to be me. It's going to be Brian. It's going to be Sean Davis. It's going to be a party, and we're going to have a great time, and I hope we're celebrating a Notre Dame win. So thanks, Ryan, for joining us. Talking a little bit of recruiting and the big weekend that Ohio State's have. They were turning dudes away to this game because they have so many recruits on campus.
Yep.
So hopefully they're going to feel really bad about Ohio State and just want to pledge to Notre Dame as soon as this game is over. But we will see what happens. All right, Brian, that kind of concludes our Notre Dame segment for our pregame show. We're all about, we do everything here. We're going to talk a little college football as a whole and kind of break down some of the big games that are going on around the country tonight, or today and tonight, and tomorrow for that matter. There is a game tomorrow that we're going to talk about as well. So every week we will talk Notre Dame for a little over an hour. Today was 90 minutes. We're going to talk Notre Dame, and then we're going to jump into some college football as a whole related topics, break down some of the big games, etc. And today is no different. And the big news out of college football, obviously over the last 24 hours, Brian, is the expanded college football playoff. We got to talk about it. This is a college football show. Let's chat about this expanded college football playoff. It's pretty much the proposal that Jack Swarbrick co-authored.
You just want to bring this up because you want to remind people that you changed my mind on this proposal.
It doesn't happen often, but when it does, yes, I will remember and I will bring it up forever. So,
no, you're right though. I just had to get that little shot in at you because we're having some fun today. But yes, it's basically the proposal that Jack Swarbrick was a big part of driving. About a year ago, a little over a year ago, right?
It felt like it was dead in the water, and then all of a sudden here we are, which is great. I mean, I'm okay with the expansion, and it also, to me, let's talk about it from Notre Dame standpoint. Right. I think it solidifies their independence. There's no reason outside of finances, which I get, but I think they're going to be able to fix that in their own way. But there's no reason for them to join a conference at this point.
Well, the interesting thing is I'm curious how this all works if you see more expansion. And more importantly, with more expansion eventually will come retraction. And what I mean by that is if things continue to expand too much, then what we're going to see is one of the Power Fives is going to go away. Does that then kind of result in them tearing up the contract? Or is it like, okay, that's fine. We have Power Four. ACC still exists. Big 12 still exists. Let's say the Pac-12 goes away. Right. Let's say the Big 10 takes Oregon and Washington, and then the Big 12 kind of eats the rest of the league or something like that. And, that's kind of how it works out. Does that mean, okay, now the Mountain West and the American Athletic Conference are both going to get playoff berth? I don't think that's going to necessarily bother too many people. It's not going to be a huge needle mover. Right. But what if it's the Big 12 and the Pac-12 are gone? Or what if it's the Pac-12 and the ACC cease to become a thing? Then what happens? So I think that's, to me, I'm not ready to get too excited about this proposal being completed yet because the SEC doesn't care about this proposal. The Big 10 doesn't care about this proposal. They're going to still keep trying to expand and grow and get to 20 teams, 20 plus teams, which then is going to basically eat the other conferences. And then now it's like, well, you can't have six teams, can't have six, because then it's going to be like, okay, so the Big 10 winners in, the Big 12 winners in, and then after that the SEC winners in, and then after that it's the Sun Belt and the American and the Mountain West and Conference USA. I mean, is that what the six automatic teams are going to be? So as long as they can keep at least four of the Power Five conferences, as long as four of them continue to be a real thing, I hope that they can keep all five. But as long as four, and even if the Pac-12 becomes a watered down version of the Pac-12, so let's say they lose Washington and Oregon, but they steal, Fresno and San Diego State and teams like that from the Mountain West, and there's still some, Power Five-ish teams in there, that's still better than nothing.
Right.
So, and I still think, to your point, it keeps Notre Dame's independence strong. I don't see Notre Dame being forced to not being independent anymore, especially when they sign a new TV deal. But as long as there's more than two conferences, Notre Dame is always going to have some power to wield. But I like it for Notre Dame, Vince, as you so elegantly, kind of made me realize is, number one, it's a great opportunity for Notre Dame to make the playoff more. They would have made, under this scenario, they would have made it in 15, 17, 18, 20, and 21, I believe. I believe they would have made it in 17 as well. I'm going to have to check on that one again. They might not have made it in 17 now that I think about it, but I'm going to just pull up the article because I did have those years at the bottom. So no, it would have been 15, 18, 20, and 21. However, I'm curious how that Stanford game would have gone in 2017 if Notre Dame knew they still had a playoff berth to play for.
Something on the line.
I think that team was kind of so dejected by the Miami loss that they were like, we got nothing to play for now.
They stole their soul. I mean,
right.
That one
right. So how does that Stanford game finish if Notre Dame knows, hey, a win and we're in the playoff still? But at least 4 times since 2015, Notre Dame would have been in each of those years. They would have been no lower than 8. They would have been a 5 seed 3 times, twice because the rule is Notre Dame can't get a first round bye. You have to be a conference champ to get a first round bye. So they'll never be higher than a 5 seed under this current proposal.
It's 5, right? They can be 5 because
they can be 5. Correct.
In here that said Meyer 03. The problem is there's number 1 Notre Dame
No.
be the 7th seed. No,
I don't believe that's accurate. I think it's the 6 highest ranked conference automatics get an automatic bid, but it doesn't mean they lock in a 5 or a 6 seed. It's the 4 highest get buys. So basically, they'd be kind of the 4 seeds, but Notre Dame would basically have they'd be in that first round of games. So they would have been a 5 seed last year just because they were already the 5 seed because of where they were going into the postseason. And then in 18 and 20, they were the 4 and 3 seeds. In the original, they would have been dropped down to the highest non-bide seed after that. And then in 2015, they would have been the 8 seed just off of what their ranking was. But each of those gets them a home game because the 8 seed still gets a home game based on that. So 5, 6, 7, and 8 get home games. Then 9, 10, 11, and 12 would play on the road basically in the first round. So that would have been 4 December games for Notre Dame. If you're playing an SEC team, if you're playing, an ACC team, you're getting a home game in the middle of flipping December in South Bend, Indiana. That's a good thing for Notre Dame. And if they are a 5 seed in those years, they're getting the 4 seed in the next round.
Right.
And I think that's a positive as well, because sometimes that 4 seed is going to be a team that's below you just because they had to leap you to get that bye. So that I think factors into it as well, to where, now in the playoff, they're getting Alabama and Clemson in round 1. And now they have a chance to not have to do that till the semis.
Right.
Or the championship game. So I think that helps as well.
And they would also have the 12 seed at home, right? I mean,
if they're the 5 seed, correct.
If they're the 5, they would have the 12. So I mean, hey, it's another home game. I mean, I don't really see the downside, to be honest with you. That's a huge revenue boost. I mean,
the downside is I do think it lessens the regular season.
Oh,
it
that's
does.
100%.
It does. I mean, you can be a 3-4 loss team and still make the college football playoff.
Right.
That's just absurd to me. That's why I'm fine with 12 is better than 8. First of all, 12 is better than 8, in my opinion. If you're going to expand, go to 12. That makes more sense. However, I still believe the best way to do it would have been the proposal that I had, which is go back to the old bowl system. Rose Bowl is, all the bowl tie-ins, then pick your 4 after the bowl games. You're expanding the opportunities because in theory, you could be the 8 seed and jump into the playoff if the right matchups happen. But at the very least, you could be 6 or 7 and still have a shot if you win your bowl game and a thing happens here, thing happens there. Now all of a sudden you're in. Everybody's watching the other bowl games to see, hey, we are, as the 6 seed, won our bowl game. Now we got to watch these other bowl games to see, who wins or who loses. So I would have gone back to that, then pick your 4 afterwards. That's what I would have done. It still would have been the same number of rounds of games. You'd still need the next 2 rounds to make that happen. So I think that would have made more sense. You're not at that point in time, Vince, you're not getting to 17 games to win a title. So if you win the Big Ten, let's say Ohio State, for example, wins the Big Ten, that would be their 13th game. The bowl game would be 14, then the semis at 15, and the title is 16. Right. Whereas now there's an opportunity where if you win say Ohio State wins the Big Ten, but they're not a top 4 seed, they then have to play the first round, which is game 14, then the quarters, which is game 15, then the semis, which is 16, and then the championship game is 17.
Right.
It's a lot of flipping games for college kids.
No, it is.
And I know they get a month off or whatever, but still, it just shows that they really weren't thinking about what's best for the kids here. It was what's best for their bottom line. But 100%. I still think the bowl system would have been good for both. Keeps the regular season match. Because now if you're Ohio State, you're not worried about the playoff. You got to worry about the Rose Bowl first. Because you're not going to get the college football playoff if you can't get to the Rose Bowl. And I think it would have gone back to making the regular season, kept the regular season more relevant, would have sort of rejuvenated the bowls, which ESPN has destroyed, and then you'd still have your 14 playoff. That's what I would have done.
Okay, fair enough.
I think that financially would have been a huge boost, but they're not willing to take risks to make that kind of thing happen. They want to go with what they know, and the playoff makes them a lot of money. So that's
very good. Yeah, I don't get all worked up about the fact that Notre Dame doesn't have a bye. If we're talking about this 12, it doesn't bother me in any way. It really doesn't.
That was my hang up at first.
Yeah, right. It doesn't bother me because, again, a conference champion that they played their 13th game, and that would be Notre Dame's 13th game. Bingo. So now you're on an even playing field with the conference champions as far as games played. So, okay, that's cool. And you get another home game out of the deal. So, and conference championships aren't home games. So, I'll take another home game where we don't have to travel.
Mike Farino said, I don't ever see a scenario where the Big Ten winner isn't one of the top 4. That wasn't the point.
Right.
I was just trying to create an example of how a team can get to 17 games. That wasn't the point. Pick the Pac-12 or the ACC. I don't care.
Well, and it could be.
The point is if you win your conference championship, 2 teams that win their conference championship are guaranteed not to be in the.
Well, what about the loser of the conference championship game? They still played the conference.
Good point. If they get into that strike, if they get in, because there will be some of those that get in. That's a good point, Vince.
Georgia, they lost the conference championship game last year, right? And so they still made it in, and they would have made. Look, the loser of the SEC championship.
You're right, because Georgia wouldn't have been able to be one of the top 4 seeds.
Correct. And so they're going to have to play outside of the top 4. So
that's a really good point.
Yeah. So there you go. They're going to be playing 17 games if they go all the way like they did last year. So,
and a team like Georgia would have a chance to do that.
Exactly. 100% agree with that. So,
and you're hurting Hawaii with this too. I'm being serious.
Okay.
Because now if you're a team that's in the Pac-12 or the Big 12 or a team in Mountain West and you think you have a legitimate shot to run a title, you're not going to do out of conference. You're not going to do that thing where you're going to go schedule Hawaii and play 13 games.
Right.
And now all of a sudden you've got to now go potentially – now you're going to play 18 games. Like it's going to hurt Hawaii getting marquee matchups. Because like what's the incentive for a team like USC to play Hawaii now or UCLA or Oregon or whatever? There isn't any. So they're going to have to play like Cal and Arizona State and teams like that. So I don't think they're helping them out either, but I don't think that's something that many people are thinking about.
Right. Okay. By the way, my kid just had another touchback, just saying. All right.
That's how much Vince loves y'all. He is not watching his son's game today. His son is a kicker and a punter for the JV at Penn High School, and he is not there because he is at IB kick. He's on the countdown to kickoff.
He's kicking him into the end zone, baby. So hopefully varsity's right around the corner. But anyway, let's talk about some of these big games, these big matchups that we've got coming. We've only got 17 minutes, Brian. We got to get on the road, baby. We got
and we talked about some of these yesterday, so we can work through some of these games. Yeah,
gotcha. So let's start off with Oregon versus Georgia. Number 11, Oregon travels to Atlanta, technically a neutral site game.
Yeah,
I'm just saying.
That's like Florida State's playing LSU in a neutral site game in New Orleans.
I know, right? I know.
Sure.
So they're taking on the number 3 Georgia Bulldogs in Atlanta at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Kickoff set for 3:30 Eastern on ABC. So why does this game matter? Obviously, it's a battle of 2 highly ranked teams. It's a chance for Oregon to pick up a big win, boost the remaining Pac-12. And Georgia, they're defending their national championship. The Stetson Bennett is back. He's like 37 years old. He's been there forever.
He's their Hunter Renfrow.
Yeah, right. In reality, he's 25, which is still old to be in college.
Is he really 25?
25 years old.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
But he is coming back to defend the title, so a lot of pressure on Georgia. How do you see this game? What are your keys for the game? And let's get a prediction out there for this one.
Vince, I think the keys for Oregon to pull off the upset is they've got to rip off some big plays early, and I think that they will have a chance to do that. I think that they've got some athletes on offense. I do think losing Tyson Dott is gonna hurt them. I think losing Alex Marabello, their offensive line coach, is gonna hurt them. I don't know. Like, here's the issue I have with Dan Lanning. It's not even an issue I have with him. I thought the success Alabama had on defense was about Nick Saban, not Kirby Smart. The reality is Alabama has never been as good on defense since Kirby left as they were when he was there. They just haven't been. And we'll see if they are now. So I comment, maybe Kirby's the reason for that success. And they've had different defensive coordinators under Kirby and different defensive coaches, and they just remain really good on defense. So you're starting to think like, okay, maybe Kirby's the reason for that, right? Yeah. So how good is Dan Lanning really? I don't know. And he can recruit, but I don't know the answer to that. And so he's an unknown to me. I think he's not walking into as good of a situation as Marcus Freeman is walking into, because they're both like 36, both really successful defensive coordinators. I think he inherits a situation with a lot more turnover. There's a lot more issues kind of going on. They really ended their season last year on a really poor note, got blown out in the Pac-12 title game, got smacked by Oklahoma in the bowl game. And then, to see their coach kind of leave for Miami, there's a lot there. I like Bo Nix as a quarterback, but he's not, the kind of guy that's going to put a team on his shoulders. Right. I think Oregon, here's the thing, if they can rip off some big plays, and if I'm wrong about Georgia's offense being really good this year, which I think it has a chance to be really good this year, if I'm wrong about that, that's how Oregon has a chance. They're going to have to harass Stetson Bennett, force him into mistakes and turnovers, because I think Georgia's defense is early in the year is going to be vulnerable. They're still going to be talented and very talented players, but they're not going to be what they were last year. Their secondary especially is going to be breaking in a lot of new guys opposite Keely Ringo. So if they can force some mistakes by Stetson Bennett, and then rip off some big plays to Dante Thornton and some of the Troy Franklin, some of the other receivers, that's how Oregon has a chance to do it, because they're going to have to do what Notre Dame does, which is start fast and get that crowd quiet. Right. That's going to be the key for them. And then give themselves some momentum of, hey, you know what? We do belong here. Because if they fall behind early, Georgia will steamroll them.
Yeah, and I do have a lot of faith in Oregon's offensive line. I think their offensive line is going to be decent. Can they use that to run the ball against this defense? Maybe. Again, Bo Nix versus Stetson Bennett. It's like, well, Stetson Bennett has a national title, so I guess I'd take Stetson Bennett in that particular argument. But at the same time, I don't necessarily trust Bo Nix, and he's in a brand new situation. Maybe he gets revitalized. I don't know. But this is going to be a tough game for Oregon to go down into Atlanta. I mean, it's a home game for Georgia, let's be honest. The line is like 17, which I also think is a little big. Yeah. To be honest with you, I think Oregon can get inside of that, but I still think Georgia wins by about 10. My prediction: Georgia 24, Oregon 14. So I think
we're close. I went 27-16 Georgia. I was close. Mike Freeman had a super chat. He said the only way I see Oregon winning, thank you for that, Mike, is if Lanning knows exactly who to target against this Georgia defense. He knows the personnel probably better than anyone. Absolutely. But I still have Georgia covering. Yeah, look, that's the one thing that makes me think, like I said, that Georgia can create some of those big plays at the beginning of the game, but they're going to have to start early. They're going to have to start fast. If they fall behind early, it'll get ugly. But if they can come out early and kind of jump ahead of Georgia, I don't think Georgia's built to come back as much as maybe some other teams. I think, although they'll be more built for it this year, but run game, tight end play isn't the thing you want to be trying to use to come back from 17-0.
Absolutely agree.
That's kind of my thing.
Absolutely agree. Okay, let's move down the coast a little bit. Let's go to Florida. Utah invades Florida. Number 7 Utah travels to the Swamp to take on unranked Florida Gators. Kickoff is set for 7 o'clock Eastern on ABC, which I'm really kind of disappointed about, because obviously we're going to be busy at 7 o'clock. I kind of wanted to watch this one.
DVR's for, buddy.
I know I'll watch it after the fact, but at the same time, I did want to watch this one live. But why does this game matter, Brian? Look, Utah, there's a lot of people on Utah's bandwagon, myself included. They got a pretty lofty number 7 ranking going into the season, and they got a tough one right out of the gate. They got to go to Florida. They got to go to the Swamp in early September. And I haven't looked at the weather forecast, but it's always nasty down there this early in the season. This is a huge game for Utah, and frankly, it's also a huge game for Florida. Is their arrow pointed in the right direction? They've got a good quarterback in Anthony Richardson. Billy Napier, offensive coordinator. Can they get that offense rolling? What does this one look like? What are your feelings on Utah and Florida?
I'm not a believer in Utah yet. I'm not. I mean, I know that they beat Oregon last year. I don't think Oregon was that good. I think that Oregon was considered better than they actually were because of the fact that they beat Ohio State. I don't think they were that good. They got smacked around by an Oklahoma team with Bob Stoops as the head coach. Like, they didn't have their coaching staff that they previously had, and still smacked Oregon around. I'm not a big fan of the talent they have there. It's good, but it's not. I mean, Utah. That smacking Utah Oregon doesn't impress me. Yes, they finished the year off against Ohio State well, but I wasn't overly impressed by that either, because that Ohio State defense was really bad at the end of the year. Yeah. They got to show me something, right? Okay. And I just don't know if they have the perimeter athletes to go down to Gainesville and do what they need to do. I think getting rid of the defensive coordinator, Grantham, at Florida was a huge boost, because I think he was their – I said this yesterday – he was their Brian Van Gorder. I think Anthony Richardson is the more dynamic quarterback. He's got a lot to show me, Vince. He's very talented. He's got a lot to show me. Sure. But I just think Florida Look, this team didn't all of a sudden lose all the talent. They were in the SEC title game 2 years ago. They were a top 10 team the 2 years before that. This team didn't just all of a sudden become filled with a bunch of nobodies. I think it was a bad year. It was a lot like Notre Dame in 2016. So I see a lot of similarities there. A head coach who lost control of the program, a defensive coordinator who just players didn't want to play for and schematically was inferior. So I think they're going to bounce back. And I think the Pac-12 is going to be all but eliminated from playoff contention in week 1. You cannot go on the road and lose games to the SEC and then beat only your own conference the rest of the way and be a playoff team perception-wise. Whether that's fair or not, that's a reality. So these two teams have a lot at stake. It's a whole different deal for them than it is Notre Dame. Notre Dame can lose to Ohio State in a competitive game, still run the table, be in the playoff. I don't think Utah can. I really don't. And so I think this is a big game for them. This is the team to me that has the most at stake this weekend of all the teams. I really do believe that.
So they're playing not only for themselves, but for their conference is what you're saying.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's more so themselves. I mean, it's the two teams from the Pac-12 that I think have the best chance to get in. And I'm actually going Florida. I'm going Florida 27-20. I do think Florida's going to win this game. I think Florida's going to be a little up and down this year, but the opener in the swamp, I just don't think Utah has the horses on the perimeter to get this one done.
That's fair. I picked Utah as one of my sleeper teams, even though it's hard to be a sleeper team when you're number 7. But I still think there's a lot of people like yourself that aren't complete believers in Utah.
Yeah.
And
they lost to BYU and San Diego State last year.
Totally get it.
And Oregon State,
No, absolutely. This is their opportunity. And since I picked them as my sleeper team, you can't lose game 1.
As a playoff team. Yeah.
You can't lose game 1, period.
No.
Right? So I have to pick them to win. I have them winning 28-25. I think it's going to be a close game. I think it's going to be a good game, but I've got Utah winning. Am I super confident about it? Not really, but I feel like they have the horses to do it. They are such a physical team. That's the only path I see for Utah winning this game is they have to out physical Florida on both sides of the ball. If they can bully Florida, they've got a shot. But if it becomes big plays and it becomes athleticism, Florida's going to win the game.
Yep,
so
agree.
Yeah, that's where I'm at on that one. Another big one that I have a feeling is going to be on the radio as we drive to Columbus. You've got number 23 Cincinnati traveling to number 19 Arkansas to take on the Razorbacks. That game kicks at 3:30 Eastern on ESPN. Look, I think this is a big game, not only for Cincinnati, but for Arkansas. Look, Cincinnati needs to prove to me that last year wasn't just a flash in the pan, that they can sustain this success. They're preseason, they're ranked, they lose a ton of firepower on offense and defense. Can they not rebuild it, but reload? Can they reload? And they're going to go to the SEC. So this is a big test for Cincinnati. And then Arkansas is the SEC darling. They're the
up and comer.
Absolutely. Yeah. So can they retain, that mantra, that, label going into the rest of the season? I think this game is important for them. So they get a chance to host a ranked team in Cincinnati. Cincinnati gets a chance to win a game in SEC country. It's a big game for both teams.
Yeah. I would push back a little bit on it being a flash in the pan because Cincinnati was really good in 2020 as well. They did go undefeated, and their only loss was a 1-point loss to Georgia in, I think, the Peach Bowl. So I think they were pretty good for 2 years, but to your point, almost all the guys responsible for all that success, coaching-wise and player-wise, with the exception of Luke Fickell, are gone. Mike Denbrock's gone. Marcus Freeman's gone. Mike Mickens is gone. They lost their DB coach to Ohio State. They lost their special teams coach to Notre Dame, Brian Mason. So I don't think they're in a position, Vince, to reload that way. Not enough to where – now, do I think Cincinnati will still be a contender in the American Athletic Conference? Yes, I do.
100%. Absolutely.
Are they good enough, to your point, to go on the road and beat a good SEC team with a lot coming back that's physical and talented? No, I don't.
Right.
I have Arkansas winning 30-20. I don't think it'll be overly close. I could see Cincinnati not getting to 20. I think Cincinnati is going by the time we get to October, Cincinnati's going to be a really good team. I just don't think they're going to have the horsepower to do it in the opener on the road. And the thing is, there's no way Arkansas overlooks them. They were a playoff team last year.
You can't.
They're not going to overlook Cincinnati. Right. So they're not going to sneak up on Arkansas because they were a playoff team. They're going to, hey, look, these guys went to Notre Dame last year and beat Notre Dame, folks.
Right.
So we need to, this is a playoff team. We need to be ready to go.
Yes.
And I think they will be. And I have Arkansas winning 30-20.
I've got Arkansas winning 31-17. So with a little bit more of a spread for my prediction, but I agree with everything that you just said. I think Cincinnati's going to win their conference. I do. I think so. They're still the class of the conference. But going on the road,
Houston's going to give them a run. I do. I like Houston this year. I think UCF will be good. But to your point, I still think they probably have top to bottom the best roster in their conference.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think Cincinnati is going to be a good team, but they're not going to be the great team that they've there's just too much to replace. And remember last year, even with all the guys that they had, they were still a red zone stop away from losing. You know what I mean? On multiple occasions. I mean, they were a bend but don't break defense in the red zone against some teams that weren't great. And can they be that lucky or that good again? I don't know. And I don't think that they can be. Right. So I don't have them winning this game, but we'll see what happens the rest of the season. Last one we're going to talk about, and this one's near and dear to all of our hearts, LSU versus Florida. Florida State travels to New Orleans. Again, technically neutral site game, but not neutral site. But it's 7:30 tomorrow night. ABC will all be watching after you all watch the IB show at 7 o'clock.
DVR it, right?
Absolutely.
And then once our show's over, you can head to it.
And you can get caught up. But no, this is a huge matchup. Did Brian Kelly make the right decision?
In all seriousness, all jokes aside, real analysis. This is a big game for both teams. For Florida State, there's more at stake for Florida State than LSU. If LSU loses, it's a legitimate look. Legitimate excuses exist, right? And we all know Brian Kelly's really good at that. But these are legitimate. Look, our roster got completely overhauled. Our coaching staff got completely overhauled. First game of the year, breaking into transfer court, all that kind of stuff. They can survive it. It's game one. Go out and win some more games. You're going to be fine. Mike Norvell, is going to have a harder time overcoming this because you're going into year 3. You missed the postseason each of the last 2 years. You've got to get some sort of signature win, because if you lose this game, now all of a sudden the boosters start talking, and all of a sudden it becomes such a toxic environment that you just can't survive it. And so, but this is also the opposite, is the kind of game for Florida State. If you can win it, it gives you that little extra cachet to where people start thinking, hey, this team's turning the corner. Right. So I think Florida State has a lot more at stake. And I think for LSU, if you're able to beat Florida State in your opener, it kind of starts to wear off some of the stink of kind of what you went through the last couple of years. So taking away my thoughts on Brian Kelly aside, I do think this is a big game for both teams. I think LSU probably has the more talent at the top of the roster. I mean, there's nobody at Florida State like Keyshawn Boutte, but I think there's enough holes in that roster that you're going into year 3 of the systems at Florida State. I thought Florida State getting an opener was good for them. They could work out some kinks against Duquesne. I think
that means something.
Yeah, I do.
Ball actually does mean something.
Yeah.
They ran the ball for a ton of yards. 3 guys over 100 yards. They ran the ball really well. Again, I understand who the competition was, but having
careful. We'll be hating on Duquesne now. I had a national championship ring from my time at Duquesne. But in all seriousness, it's a big game for both teams. There's more on the line for Florida State.
Yeah,
I don't have a score prediction. I honestly haven't thought enough about this game because, as I said yesterday on my show, we weren't going to do predictions for games of 2 unranked teams. So I don't have a score prediction, but I do think there's a lot. I do think it's a very interesting game. Even if Brian Kelly wasn't the head coach, let's say Lincoln Riley would have taken the job of Brian Kelly with USC, just for argument's sake, I'd still be saying the same exact things about this game. It's a huge game. Absolutely. Both teams have a lot at stake in it.
And to be honest with you, and again, I'm putting aside the personal bias, but you look at LSU's schedule, you look at the roster that they have. Winning or losing this game could be the difference in them going 500 or lower or 500 or better. You know what I mean? Like, this could be kind of a pendulum game. It's kind of a toss-up game for them. And that's huge. Being over 500 would be a very good thing at LSU for this year.
Yeah.
Because they have a killer schedule. They do.
Yeah.
This game could mean the difference between a 500 team or not. So
I think that's true for both teams. I think that's true for both teams. You're absolutely right. Right.
So, look, I don't necessarily have a prediction for this one. I'm going to be rooting for Florida State.
Sure.
I'll say it.
I know who I'm rooting for. I just haven't thought enough about the game to make a prediction.
Right. And that's totally fair. And so we'll see what happens, but I will definitely be tuning in. It will be must-see TV in the D'Addario household tomorrow night after our show where we're breaking down the Ohio State Notre
So
Dame.
before we get out of here, Vince, we did have some super chats that we did not get to. So let's rock through these here real fast. And we appreciate all of you for your super chats here earlier. And we will promise that next time we will get to these much sooner than we did today.
No doubt. Jacob Saylor, thank you so much. Says, shout out to my dad, Tim. I know you'll see this. I need to see our defense have a field day on Stroud. Put him in the dirt.
Oh, yes.
Comfortable. No doubt.
That's a big part of this game for Notre Dame. No doubt about it.
Huge key. So Jason Warnock with the super chat. Thank you so much. Seems Ohio State media think because Knowles is great in press conferences that the Bucks defense will rival the Bears 86 defense.
Oh, yeah. It will. And here's the thing. Jackson Smith and Jigba is also going to have 2,000 yards receiving.
Right.
So it's going to be the 19 LSU offense and the 2011 Alabama defense is what this is going to be.
Look, if we're talking about winning the press conference, I'm still taking Marcus Freeman.
Sure.
Just saying. Okay, TA8, thank you so much for the super chat. He says, thanks for y'all's coverage year round. It helps me pass the offseason and gets us even
Same
more.
here. For us too.
Now, the IB Nation and the IB family are going to see a major win for the Irish tonight. Look, you're going to see one heck of a show tonight if Notre Dame can pull this one off. Okay, just saying, you're gonna have a heck of a show regardless. But if Notre Dame wins, it's gonna be a whole other shooting match, baby.
Yeah,
promise you that. So is that all? Oh, got one more.
One more.
Fitzgerald, thank you very, 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 very much. Thanks again for all the content, fellas. Haven't been this pumped for a season in a long time. ND will win tonight.
That is it.
Hope you're right, Patrick.
Great way to end it right there.
You're right. So thank you everyone for joining us on our first preseason edition of the IB Countdown to Kickoff. We will be back every single Saturday that Notre Dame is playing at 10 a.m., 10 to noon. We'll break down Notre Dame. We'll break down the opponent. We'll talk a little college football. Really looking forward to it. So, excuse me, for Brian, I'm Vince, and we will talk to you post-game edition. Hit that notification bell, people, so you know when we're going to be coming back. Hey, go Irish.